Well, hey there, everybody. This is Pastor Scott with Lathrop First Christian Church. I just wanted to record a short Thanksgiving devotional message that maybe you're going to watch on Thanksgiving. Maybe you'll watch it a couple days later or maybe years later. Who knows? But anyways, I am Pastor Scott with Lathrop First Christian Church in Lathrop, Missouri. And as I was thinking about Thanksgiving this year, I was actually thinking very much about me as a preacher, as a minister, and what that actually means. So much of what I'm going to say is going to be very specific to me and maybe other ministers, but I think also very applicable to you in a whole variety of ways after you take what I say and apply that to your daily life. But I was thinking about when I was going through Manhattan Christian College and some of the professors that I had and some of the ministers I've listened to preach that I've gone to different churches, and I go, oh wow, that is such a good message. That minister, he has such a deep Bible knowledge, or that minister, he can really tell a bunch of stories that connect to the topic, things like that. And I can look at them and go, wow, if I could be that person, if I could only preach like that. And that really was a thing the first couple years that I was actually going through and preaching and creating sermons and things like that. But very early on, I realized there is no way that that is a sustainable path. I am never going to be Dr. Paddock. I am never going to be a John Middleton that can tell a bunch of stories with his sermons and every week have a different story to connect. You know, those are not things that I can do. I'm never going to have that deep Bible knowledge where I can go through and touch on 50 different passages to talk about the one exact passage that I'm doing. It's just not feasible that I'm going to be able to do every different aspect of sermonizing, right? Some people will naturally be gifted in some areas versus others. And so the delivery of sermons, even if you're preaching on the same message or passage, is going to come across a little bit different. And one of the things, maybe you've heard of them, there's a gentleman named R.C. Sproul and John MacArthur. Now, they both died before the time of this recording, but they were good friends. Didn't always agree with each other on different things, but if you watched how they preached, they was totally different. You had John MacArthur, who was very stoic behind the pulpit, pretty much reading from a manuscript, but pretty much just straightforward. There wasn't a whole lot of tone inflection there. He didn't get too excited, just kind of middle of the road. And then you had R.C. Sproul, who did have more stories he would tell and more energy. He'd get out from behind the pulpit and walk around and things like that. And so there you saw two gentlemen very well respected within most church communities, I would say, if people know who they are. And yet they delivered messages totally different. And so as I was pondering on this, it didn't take me long to realize, you know what? I need to take what God's given me, those gifts, and yes, I can continue to improve upon sermon delivery and things like that, but take those gifts and embrace it and recognize I'm not going to be like everybody else. We're all going to preach or deliver a message differently. And so as I was thinking of this and I was thinking about Thanksgiving, one of the things that I was thinking of is, what is it to be thankful? Well, it means to be full of thanks. That's okay. What does that mean? And one of the ways that you can talk about being thankful is the idea of being happy with what you have, or happy with the gifts that were given, but just happy with what you have. And if we understand being thankful, this idea of simply being happy with what you have, thankfulness goes very much in line with contentment. If you are thankful, you're not going to want a bunch of other things. You're going to be content. If I say, oh, I am so thankful for this turkey, but I wish I had the ham and potatoes and sweet potatoes and dressing and all this other stuff, am I really thankful for the turkey? Because I'm definitely not content with just the turkey. And so as we think about thankfulness, what we have, what we've been given, what we've been blessed with, whether you're talking about physical things or you're talking about spiritual gifts or salvation itself, whatever it is, we also need to find a way to be content in what we have. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't be motivated to grow those gifts, to use those gifts, to allow those gifts to mature and blossom, right? So being content does not necessarily mean that you don't have any motivation. Sometimes I think in today's world we hear contentment and we go, oh, well, he's just happy with where he is. Yes, we're happy with where we are, but it's also okay to grow into those gifts and continue to use those gifts, okay? And as I kept dealing with this, I actually was thinking about the NFL. How many times do you have a coordinator, whether it's an offensive coordinator or defense coordinator, and he's really good at his job? And you go, oh, he's going to be the next head coach, and he's going to be a great head coach. And he does become a head coach, and he's a horrible head coach. Right? Because it's a different job. And so sometimes we can grow and mature in our gifts, but we also need to truly understand who we are and where God wants us to be, because maybe you're not going to be the person that is the head coach. Maybe you really are just a talented coordinator or a running backs coach or a offensive game plan manager, whatever it might be. I think about that in the military as well, you know. At some point, they keep promoting you because you're doing a good job, and they promote you and promote you, promote you. Eventually, they promote you so high you stop doing a good job because you're not blessed with whatever you need to do that job, okay? You weren't intended to be a sergeant major. You were intended to be a, staff sergeant or a sergeant first class, whatever it might be. And so when we think about our spiritual gifts, it kind of fits into that as well. Use it, grow with it, but also be content in knowing your limitations. That I am never going to be that person or that person. I'm intended to be here, and I'm going to be content with that. For our Bible passage, I was thinking about the Apostle Paul writing to the Philippians, and he talks about this contentment that he has. He says in chapter 4, indeed, you have been concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. Whether I am well fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. And so here you have the Apostle Paul. And the Apostle Paul knows I need to be content where I am. It doesn't mean I'm not going to look for other opportunities to take the gospel somewhere else and where God's calling me to lead and what I'm called to do. But I need to be content in all situations and just resting in God's assurance, but also looking at where is God's will leading me? Where does God want me in this world, in this life? And so I think this is one of those things that can apply broadly, but again, I was just using it as I was thinking about some of the ministers that I've listened to preach, especially early on, and go, oh, I wish I could be that person, or wish I could be that person. Well, if I'm wishing to be that person, I'm not being the person God's called me to be. I'm not being content with where God's put me and the skill set God has given me and cultivated in me. And I need to do that. And so this Thanksgiving, I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. But also, let's reflect on what it truly means to be thankful or to be happy for what we have, and what it means to truly be content with what God's given you and where God has placed you. You guys have a blessed Thanksgiving, and I'll see you on Sunday.